My name is Randall, and I am 58 years old. I spent my whole life working with my hands, fixing wires, climbing ladders, doing whatever it took to put food on the table and give my family a good life. Over the past 12 years, I gave my son and his family $298,000. I never thought of it as a debt. I thought of it as love. But somewhere along the way, my son forgot what love means. This story begins with a birthday party I was never meant to attend. Before I share what happened, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I would love to know who is listening. And if this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. It helps more than you know. Now let me take you back to the beginning so you can understand just how deep this wound goes. My son Derek was born in 1990. From the moment he came into this world, he was everything to me. I remember holding him for the first time in that hospital room, his tiny fingers wrapping around my thumb, and I made a silent promise that I would do anything to give him a good life. My wife Linda was beside me. Her eyes filled with tears of joy, and in that moment, our little family felt complete. When Derek was a boy, we did everything together. Every summer, we would drive up to Lake Erie and spend whole weekends fishing off a small wooden dock. I taught him how to bait a hook, how to wait patiently for the fish to bite, and how to appreciate the silence of nature. Those were some of the happiest days of my life. We would sit there for hours sometimes, not catching a single thing, but it did not matter. What mattered was that we were together. In the garage behind our house, I taught Derek how to work on cars. He was maybe 10 or 11 years old when he first handed me a wrench while I fixed the old pickup truck. His eyes were wide with curiosity, and he asked 100 questions about how engines worked. I answered every single one. I wanted him to grow up knowing how to use his hands, how to solve problems, how to be self-sufficient. Those lessons in the garage were about more than just cars. They were about life. Friday nights were sacred in our home. Derek and I would sit on the couch, a bowl of popcorn between us, watching football together. He would cheer for the same team I did, copying my reactions, pumping his fist when we scored a touchdown. Linda would shake her head and laugh at us, calling us her two crazy sports fans. Those nights felt like they would last forever. But nothing lasts forever. When Derek was 16 years old, Linda was diagnosed with cancer. It was aggressive and it moved fast. Within 8 months, she was gone. I held her hand in that hospital room as she took her last breath, and a part of me died with her that day. Suddenly, I was not just a father anymore. I was both mother and father to a teenage boy who had just lost the most important woman in his life. I worked double shifts at the electrical plant to keep us afloat. I would come home exhausted at 2 in the morning, then wake up at 6 to make sure Derek had breakfast before school. I helped him with homework, even when my eyes could barely stay open. I attended every parent-teacher conference, every school event, every football game where he sat in the stands with his friends. I did everything I could to make sure he never felt like he was missing out on anything because his mother was gone. Derek graduated from high school with decent grades. He went to college, studied business, and eventually got a job at a mid-sized company in Columbus. I was proud of him. He was making his own way in the world, just like I had always hoped he would. In 2014, Derek met a woman named Stephanie. She was pretty well-spoken and came from what seemed like a respectable family. When Derek brought her home to meet me for the first time, I noticed something right away. She was polite, but there was a distance in her eyes. She smiled at the right moments, said the right things, but I could tell she was holding something back. I did not think much of it at the time. I figured she was just nervous meeting her boyfriend's father for the first time. I told myself she would warm up eventually. They got engaged 6 months later, and the wedding was planned for the following spring. When I asked Derek about the budget, he told me that Stephanie's parents could not afford to contribute much. They were good people, he said, but they had financial troubles. So I offered to pay for the entire wedding. It seemed like the natural thing to do. This was my only son getting married. I wanted it to be perfect. The wedding cost $45,000. The venue was a beautiful estate outside of Columbus with white tents and string lights and flowers everywhere. Stephanie looked stunning in her dress, and Derek looked handsome in his suit. I stood in the front row watching my son say his vows, and I thought about Linda. I wished she could have been there to see this moment. I imagined her standing beside me holding my hand, tears streaming down her face. In a way, I felt like she was there somewhere watching over us. 2 years after the wedding in 2016, my first grandchild was born. They named him Ethan. When I walked into that hospital room and saw him for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. It was like the world had color again after years of gray. I held that tiny baby in my arms, looked into his eyes, and I started to cry. I could not help it. For the first time since Linda died, I felt genuine, unbridled joy. 2 years after Ethan, my granddaughter Emma arrived. She was a beautiful baby with big, curious eyes and a smile that could light up any room. Now I had 2 grandchildren, 2 reasons to keep going. 2 little people who I wanted to watch, grow up, and experience life. I started making the drive from Toledo to Columbus regularly, about 2 hours each way. Every visit I brought gifts. Toys for the kids, clothes they would grow into, and always a check to help with expenses. Derek had mentioned that money was tight since Stephanie had stopped working to stay home with the children. I understood. Raising kids is expensive. So I helped wherever I could. The first time Derek called me asking for money, I did not hesitate. He said they were behind on rent and needed $1,800 to catch up. I transferred it the same day. A few months later, he called again. Stephanie needed a new car because hers had broken down and could not be repaired. I wrote a check for $28,000 to cover a reliable vehicle. Then they wanted to renovate the kitchen because it was outdated, and Stephanie felt embarrassed having guests over. That was another $15,000. I never asked to be paid back. I never even thought about it. To me, this was simply what fathers do. They take care of their children even when those children are grown. They sacrifice so that the next generation can have it better. That is what my own father did for me, and I was determined to do the same for Derek. Looking back now, I wonder if that was my first mistake. Not the giving itself, but the way I gave without question, without boundary, without ever asking for anything in return except love. Maybe I taught Derek that my resources were unlimited. Maybe I taught him that my love came with no conditions and no expectations. And maybe that made it too easy for him to take me for granted. The years between 2018 and 2022 were when everything started to change, though I did not see it clearly at the time. The financial requests kept coming, each one larger than the last. And I kept saying yes, because I did not know how to say no to my own son. The biggest request came in 2019. Derek called me one evening, his voice tight with stress, and told me that he and Stephanie had found their dream home. It was in a nice neighborhood, with good schools, a big backyard for the kids, everything they had ever wanted. But they needed help with the down payment. The bank required $60,000 up front, and they had only saved about $12,000. Derek asked if I could cover the difference. I did not have $60,000 sitting in a savings account. I had to sell my house in Toledo, the house where I had raised Derek, the house where Linda and I had built our life together. I sold it and moved into a smaller apartment on the other side of town. The difference between what I sold the house for and what I paid for the apartment went directly to Derek. I told myself it was worth it. My grandchildren would grow up in a beautiful home. That was what mattered. After the house came the tuition. Derek and Stephanie decided that Ethan should go to a private school because the public schools in their area were not good enough. Private school tuition was $12,000 per year. They asked if I could help. I said yes. For 4 years, I paid that tuition a total of $48,000. Then there was the second car. Derek said he needed something more reliable for his commute to work. His old car was giving him trouble, and he could not afford to miss work because of mechanical issues. I wrote a check for $35,000. Then Stephanie's credit card debt. She had been overspending, Derek admitted with embarrassment. She liked nice things and the bills had piled up. They were paying 18% interest and could barely keep up with the minimum payments. Would I help them get out from under it? I paid $22,000 to clear her debt. Then the roof. The house they had bought, the dream home I had helped them afford, needed a new roof. The old one was leaking and the damage was getting worse. $14,000. I kept a notebook where I wrote down every amount I sent. Not because I wanted to collect someday, but because I wanted to remember. I wanted to have a record of how much I had loved, how much I had sacrificed, how much of my life I had poured into my son's family. By the end of 2022, the total was well over $200,000. And that is when I started to notice that the phone calls were changing. Derek used to call me every Sunday evening. It was our tradition. We would talk for 30 or 45 minutes about everything and nothing. How the kids were doing, how work was going, what I had been up to during the week. Those calls made me feel connected to my son even though we lived 2 hours apart. They made me feel like I was still part of his life. But somewhere along the way, the Sunday calls became less frequent. First it was every other week, then once a month, then only when Derek needed something. I would see his name on my phone and feel a flutter of hope thinking he was calling just to talk. But it was always the same thing. Dad, we have a situation. Dad, something came up. Dad, can you help us out? One time I called the house just to say hello and ask how the grandchildren were doing. Stephanie answered. Her voice was flat, almost annoyed. Derek is busy right now, she said. I asked if I could talk to Ethan or Emma. They are busy too, she replied. Then she hung up without saying goodbye, without promising that Derek would call me back. I sat there holding the phone, listening to the silence on the other end, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Something was wrong. But I convinced myself that I was overreacting. They had 2 young children. Life was hectic. They did not have time for long phone conversations with an old man who lived 2 hours away. The real confirmation came on Ethan's 5th birthday. I had been planning to drive down for the party. I had bought a present weeks in advance, a little toy truck that Ethan had pointed at in a catalog when I visited. I was excited. I had not seen the kids in almost 2 months. A few days before the party, Derek sent me a text message. It said that the birthday party was going to be small, just a few of Ethan's friends from preschool. Nothing fancy. No need for me to make the long drive. I was disappointed, but I understood. Not every birthday party needed to be a big family gathering. Ethan was turning 5. His friends were more important to him now than his grandfather. That was natural. That was healthy. But a week after Ethan's birthday, I was scrolling through social media and I saw the photos. The party had not been small. There were at least 30 people in those pictures. There were balloons and streamers and a huge cake shaped like a dinosaur. There were children running around the backyard, and adults standing in groups laughing and talking. And right in the center of one photo, smiling proudly, were Stephanie's parents. I stared at that photo for a long time. I zoomed in on every face looking for one that I recognized as my own reflection. But I was not there. I had not been invited. I had been specifically told not to come. I called Derek that night. "Son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I saw the pictures from Ethan's birthday party. You told me it was going to be small." There was a long pause. "Yeah," Derek finally said. "It ended up being bigger than we planned." "Your mother-in-law was there," I said. "But you told me not to come." Another pause. Longer this time. "Dad, Stephanie thought it would be better if you did not come," he said. "She said you would not fit in with the other guests. Something about the way you dress. The way I dress." I looked down at myself. I was wearing the same kind of clothes I had always worn. Work pants, a clean flannel shirt. Nothing fancy, but nothing shameful either. These were the clothes of a man who had spent his life working with his hands, who had never pretended to be something he was not. I did not argue with Derek. I did not raise my voice. I just said okay and hung up the phone. That night I sat alone in my small apartment, and I tried to figure out what I had done wrong. I replayed every conversation I had ever had with Stephanie, looking for the moment where I had offended her. I thought about every visit, every interaction, every word I had spoken. I could not find anything. I could not understand why she wanted me gone. For the first time in my life, I started to wonder if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I really was too old, too plain, too working class to fit into my son's new life. Maybe I embarrassed him. Maybe my presence was a reminder of where he came from, and he did not want that reminder anymore. I did not sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in my own family. The holidays that year confirmed everything I had been afraid to believe. Thanksgiving 2022 arrived, and I waited for the invitation that always came. Derek and Stephanie usually hosted the family dinner at their house, and I had attended every year since Ethan was born. It was the one time of year when I could count on seeing everyone, when I could sit at the table and feel like I belonged. But the invitation never came. A week before Thanksgiving, I finally called Derek to ask about the plans. "Oh," Derek said, his voice casual. "We are going to Stephanie's parents' place this year. Her mom has not been feeling well, and Stephanie wants to be close to her." I understood. Family takes care of family. If Stephanie's mother was sick, it made sense for them to spend the holiday with her. "I hope she feels better," I said. "Maybe I can come down for Christmas instead." "Yeah," Derek said. "We will figure something out." He did not sound enthusiastic. He sounded like he was trying to end the conversation. I spent Thanksgiving alone that year. I made myself a small turkey breast and some mashed potatoes. I watched football on television and tried not to think about the empty chairs around my table. I told myself it was fine. One holiday alone was not the end of the world. There would be other holidays. The day after Thanksgiving, I checked social media again. And there they were. Photos from Thanksgiving dinner at Derek's house. Not Stephanie's parents' house. Derek's house. The same house I had helped them buy. The same house I had helped them repair. In the photos, I could see the dining room table covered with food. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie. There were at least a dozen people seated around the table. Stephanie's parents were there, looking perfectly healthy. Her mother was laughing at something, a glass of wine in her hand. She did not look sick at all. I sat there looking at those photos, and I felt something break inside me. It was not anger. Not yet. It was something worse. It was the realization that my son had lied to me. He had looked me in the eye, or at least spoken to me on the phone, and told me a lie so that I would not come to Thanksgiving dinner. Christmas was even worse. I decided to drive down to Columbus without being invited. I knew it was risky. I knew Stephanie might not be happy to see me. But I wanted to give the grandchildren their presents in person. I wanted to see their faces light up when they opened the gifts I had chosen for them. I arrived at their house on Christmas Eve afternoon. The driveway was full of cars I did not recognize. The house was decorated beautifully with lights along the roofline and a wreath on the door. Through the window, I could see people moving around inside, laughing and talking. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Stephanie opened the door. She was wearing a red dress and her hair was done up nicely. When she saw me, her smile disappeared. "Randall," she said, "we were not expecting you." "I know," I said. "I just wanted to drop off some presents for the kids." I held up the shopping bag full of wrapped gifts. Stephanie looked at the bag, then looked back at me. She did not move aside to let me in. "We have company right now," she said. "It is not a good time." "I just want to say hello to Ethan and Emma," I said. "Just for a minute." Stephanie glanced over her shoulder, then turned back to me. She held out her hand for the bag. "I will make sure they get these," she said. I handed her the bag. She took it without thanking me. Then she stepped back and started to close the door. "Merry Christmas, Randall," she said. And the door clicked shut in my face. I stood on that porch for a long time. The temperature was somewhere around 10 degrees below zero, and the wind was cutting right through my coat. But I could not make myself walk back to the car. I just stood there looking at the closed door, trying to understand how this had become my life. Eventually, I turned and walked back to my car. I drove home in the dark, 2 hours of empty highway, with nothing but my thoughts for company. I did not turn on the radio. I did not want to hear Christmas music. I did not want to hear anything at all. Even after everything that had happened, I did not stop sending money. Maybe that was foolish. Maybe that was desperate. But I kept thinking that if I just showed enough love, if I just proved myself enough, things would change. Derek would realize what he was doing. Stephanie would soften. They would invite me back into the family, and everything would go back to the way it used to be. In February 2023, Derek called to say they needed $20,000. The heating system in the house had failed, and they needed a complete replacement. The house where I had helped them put down the payment. The house where I was not welcome. I sent the money. In May, Derek called again. They had fallen behind on the car payment, the car I had bought for him. They needed $15,000 to catch up. I sent the money. Each time I wrote a check or made a transfer, I told myself that this was different. This was about the grandchildren. Ethan and Emma needed a warm house. They needed their parents to have reliable transportation. I was not giving money to Derek and Stephanie. I was giving it to my grandchildren. But somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth. I was buying time. I was paying for the privilege of staying connected to my family, even if that connection was just a phone call every few months when they needed something. One afternoon, I ran into Howard at the grocery store. Howard and I had been friends since high school. We had played football together, chased girls together, grown into men together. He was one of the few people who really knew me. We got coffee at a little diner down the street, and Howard asked about Derek and the grandkids. I found myself telling him everything. The money I had given, the holidays I had spent alone, the door that had closed in my face on Christmas Eve. Howard listened without interrupting. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. "Randall," he said, "they are using you. You have to see that." "I know," I said. "But what am I supposed to do? He is my son." Howard leaned forward. "Your son is a grown man. He is almost 35 years old. He should be taking care of you by now, not the other way around." I did not have an answer for that. "You need to stop," Howard said. "Stop sending money. Stop chasing them. If they want you in their life, they will come to you." "But the grandchildren," I said. "The grandchildren will grow up and see the truth for themselves someday." Howard said, "Right now you are just enabling this. You are letting them treat you like an ATM machine." I knew he was right. But knowing something and doing something about it are two very different things. "Derek is all I have left," I said quietly. "After Linda died, it was just me and him. If I lose him, I have nobody." Howard reached across the table and put his hand on my arm. "You have yourself," he said. "And right now, you are losing that too." September 2024 changed everything. I was sitting in my apartment one morning going through my mail when I saw an envelope with Derek's return address. My heart jumped. I could not remember the last time Derek had sent me something in the mail instead of just calling or texting. I opened the envelope carefully, almost reverently. Inside was a card. On the front was a picture of a birthday cake with candles and the words, "You are invited," in bright, colorful letters. I opened the card and read the details. Ethan was turning 8 years old. The party was scheduled for October 14th. There was an address, a time, and a note at the bottom in Derek's handwriting, "Hope you can make it, Dad." I sat there holding that card, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. Maybe things were changing. Maybe Derek had finally realized how much he had hurt me. Maybe Stephanie had softened. Maybe this invitation was an olive branch, a chance to start over, a sign that they wanted me back in their lives. I started planning immediately. My back had been giving me trouble for the past few years, and the 2-hour drive to Columbus was getting harder. So I decided to fly this time. I booked a round-trip ticket from Toledo to Columbus, even though it was expensive for such a short flight. I wanted to arrive rested and comfortable, not exhausted from driving. I booked a hotel room near Derek's house so I could stay overnight and spend extra time with the grandchildren. I chose a nice hotel, nicer than I would usually pick, because I wanted everything about this trip to be special. Then I went shopping for presents. For Ethan, I bought the bicycle he had been asking about for months. It was a beautiful bike, bright blue with silver accents, exactly the kind of bike I would have dreamed about when I was his age. I also bought a helmet and a set of elbow and knee pads, because safety matters. For Emma, I bought a dress she had pointed at in a store window the last time I visited. It was pink with little flowers embroidered on the collar, and I remembered how her eyes had lit up when she saw it. I spent almost $1,000 total on the gifts, the tickets, and the hotel room. It was more than I should have spent, but I did not care. This was my chance to reconnect with my family. This was worth any price. I also bought myself a new suit. I remembered what Derek had said about the way I dress, how Stephanie thought I would not fit in with the other guests. I was not going to give her any excuse to look down on me this time. I went to a department store and let the salesman help me pick out a nice gray suit with a blue tie. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought I looked pretty good for a 58-year-old retired electrician. I even got a haircut and trimmed my beard. I wanted to look my best. I wanted to show them that I could belong in their world if they would just give me a chance. The night before I was supposed to leave, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to Ethan. I wanted to give him something more than just presents. I wanted to give him a piece of our family history. In the letter, I told him about his father when Derek was a boy. I told him about our fishing trips to Lake Erie, about the hours we spent in the garage working on cars, about the football games we watched together. I told him that his father had been my best friend when he was growing up, and that I hoped someday Ethan and his own father would have that same kind of bond. I told him about his grandmother Linda, how she used to bake cookies every Sunday morning, and how the whole house would smell like vanilla and chocolate. I told him that she would have loved him so much if she had lived to meet him. I sealed the letter in an envelope and packed it with the other gifts. I imagined giving it to Ethan at the party, watching him read it, seeing his face as he learned about the family he came from. On October 12th, 2 days before the party, I was making final preparations for my trip. I had laid out my new suit on the bed. My suitcase was packed. My plane ticket was printed and ready. I decided to check social media one more time just to see if there were any updates about the party. Maybe they had posted something about decorations or a theme. I wanted to be prepared. What I found destroyed me. On the page of Stephanie's sister, there was a photo album titled Ethan's 8th Birthday Bash. I clicked on it with a strange feeling in my stomach. The photos were from October 10th, 4 days before the date on my invitation. In the pictures, I could see the backyard of Derek's house transformed into a party space. There were balloons everywhere, streamers hanging from the trees, a long table covered with food and presents. A banner stretched across the fence reading, "Happy 8th Birthday, Ethan," in big letters. There were at least 40 people in those photos. Friends, neighbors, children running around with cake on their faces. Stephanie's parents were there posing with the grandchildren. Her sister was there, the one who had posted the pictures. Derek was there, standing beside his son, with a proud smile on his face. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. I clicked through the photos one by one, studying each face, looking for some explanation. Maybe I had misread the invitation. Maybe I had gotten the date wrong. But no. I pulled out the card and looked at it again. October 14th. That was what it said. That was what Derek had written. The party had happened on October 10th. The invitation said October 14th. They had sent me an invitation to the wrong date on purpose. They had never intended for me to be there. I picked up my phone and called Derek. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Then it went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I called 10 more times over the next hour. Each time it went to voicemail. Finally, on the 11th call, Derek answered. "Dad," he said. His voice was flat. "What is it? I saw the photos," I said. "The party already happened. You gave me the wrong date." There was silence on the other end. It stretched on for so long that I thought he had hung up. "Derek," I said. "Talk to me." "The party got moved because of weather," he finally said. "We thought it might rain on the 14th, so we moved it up." "But you did not tell me," I said. "You did not call to give me the new date." More silence. "Stephanie forgot," Derek said. "She was supposed to call you, but she forgot." I saw the photos, I said again. "Your mother-in-law was there. Your neighbors were there. Everyone was there except me. And you are telling me Stephanie forgot to call me." Derek sighed. The kind of sigh you make when you are tired of a conversation. "Dad," he said, and his voice changed. It became harder, more direct. "Stephanie did not want you there. Okay, she has never wanted you there. She thinks you are an embarrassment. She thinks you do not fit in with our friends and our life. I have been trying to protect you from hearing this, but you keep pushing." I could not speak. I could not breathe. "I sent you the invitation so you would not feel bad," Derek continued. "I figured you would just show up on the wrong day and we would tell you there was a mix-up. I did not think you would see the pictures. You lied to me, I whispered. You deliberately lied to me. I was trying to spare your feelings, Derek said. But honestly, Dad, maybe it is better this way. Now you know the truth. I sat there holding the phone, trying to find words, but there were no words for what I was feeling. What about the $298,000, I finally said. What about everything I have done for you? That is different, Derek said. That is family helping family. It does not mean you get to control our lives or demand to be included in everything. I never demanded anything, I said. I just wanted to see my grandchildren. Derek did not respond. I love you, I said. I love Ethan and Emma. I have given everything I have to support your family. And this is how you treat me, look. Dad, Derek said. I have to go. We can talk about this later. And he hung up. I do not remember what happened next. I think I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. At some point, the phone slipped out of my hand and fell to the floor. I did not pick it up. I looked around my small apartment. I thought about the house I had sold to help Derek buy his home. I thought about the retirement savings I had drained. I thought about all the evenings I had spent alone while my son's family celebrated holidays without me. And I thought about that number. $298,423. That is what I had given them. That is what my love had cost. In return, I had received nothing. Less than nothing. I had been deliberately excluded, systematically pushed away, and finally lied to so blatantly that there was no way to pretend it was a misunderstanding. I had been treated like a fool, and the worst part was I had let it happen. The weeks after that phone call were the darkest of my life. I canceled my plane ticket. I returned the birthday presents. I put the new suit back in the closet and did not look at it again. I took down all the photos of Derek and the grandchildren that hung on my walls because I could not bear to look at their faces. I stopped eating regular meals. I would go whole days forgetting to have lunch, then realize at midnight that all I had eaten was a piece of toast. I lost weight. My clothes started to hang loose on my frame. I stopped leaving the apartment except when absolutely necessary. I did not want to see anyone. I did not want to talk to anyone. I especially did not want to run into Howard, because I knew he would ask how I was doing, and I did not have the strength to tell him the truth. At night, I would sit in my armchair and look through old photo albums. Pictures of Derek as a baby. Derek learning to walk. Derek on his first day of school. Derek graduating from high school from college. Derek on his wedding day standing next to Stephanie, both of them smiling like they had the whole world ahead of them. Where had that boy gone? The boy who used to sit beside me in the fishing boat, asking endless questions about life. The boy who handed me tools in the garage, eager to learn everything I could teach him. The boy who hugged me after his mother's funeral and told me we would get through this together. That boy was gone. In his place was a man I did not recognize. A man who could lie to his own father without hesitation. A man who chose his wife's comfort over his father's dignity. A man who took $298,000 and offered not even basic human decency in return. Some nights I thought about packing up everything I owned, moving somewhere far away, and starting completely over. A small cabin in the mountains, maybe. Or a beach town on the coast. Somewhere no one knew my name or my story. Somewhere I could pretend the last 12 years had never happened. Other nights I thought about darker things. Not acting on them, but thinking, wondering what was the point of anything when the person you loved most in the world had thrown you away like garbage. I was drowning, and I did not know how to save myself. Then my sister Doris called. Doris is 3 years younger than me and lives in Michigan. We had always been close, but after Linda died, we drifted apart a little. Life got busy. We both had our own problems to deal with. We talked maybe once a month, sometimes less. She called because I had not returned any of her texts in 3 weeks. She said she was worried about me. I did not want to talk at first. I said I was fine, just tired. But Doris knew me too well. She kept asking questions, kept pushing gently, until the whole story came pouring out of me. The money, the exclusions, the fake invitation, the phone call where Derek admitted everything. When I finished talking, there was a long silence on the line. Randall Doris finally said, "I need you to listen to me. I am listening. You have spent the last 12 years giving everything you have to someone who does not value it," she said. "You have emptied your savings, sold your home, sacrificed your retirement. And what have you gotten in return? A door closed in your face on Christmas Eve. A lie that got you to miss your grandson's birthday party." "I know," I whispered. "You have been trying to buy their love," she continued. "And I understand why. After Linda died, Derek was all you had left. You were terrified of losing him too. So you gave and gave and gave, hoping that if you just gave enough, he would love you back the way you needed him to." I felt tears running down my face. I did not try to stop them. "But here is the thing," Randall Doris said. "You cannot buy love. You cannot earn it through sacrifice. Either someone loves you or they do not. And if they do not, no amount of money in the world will change that." "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Just give up on my son," No, Doris said. "You are supposed to stop giving up on yourself." That sentence hit me like a punch to the chest. "You have been so focused on being a good father," Doris continued, "that you forgot you are also allowed to be a person. A person with feelings, with dignity, with the right to be treated with basic respect. You are not just a wallet, Randall. You are a human being. And you deserve better than this." I could not speak. I just sat there crying quietly, listening to my sister say the things I had been too afraid to say to myself. "When was the last time you did something just for you?" Doris asked. "When was the last time you thought about your own happiness instead of Derek's?" I could not remember. "Start there," Doris said. "Start by remembering that you matter too." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time thinking about what she had said. Then I did something I had not done in years. I pulled out all my financial records, every bank statement, and check stub and credit card receipt from the past 12 years, and I started adding up the numbers. It took me most of the night. When I was finished, I stared at the total. $298,423. That is how much I had given Derek and Stephanie since they got married. That is how much of my life savings, my retirement fund, my security I had handed over to people who could not even be bothered to invite me to my grandson's birthday party. I looked at that number, and something shifted inside me. The grief was still there. The hurt was still there. But something else was rising up beneath it. Something harder. Something clearer. I had been lied to. I had been used. I had been discarded. And I was done. The next morning, I sat down at my kitchen table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I had never been good with words, but I knew what I needed to say. I wrote a letter to Derek. I did not write it in anger, though I had plenty of anger in me. I did not write it to accuse or to blame, though there was plenty I could have accused him of. I wrote it simply to state the truth as clearly as I could, without embellishment, without drama. I told him that I knew about the fake invitation. I told him that I knew he had deliberately excluded me from Ethan's birthday party. I told him that I had heard the words he spoke on the phone, that Stephanie found me embarrassing, that he had been trying to protect me from the truth. I told him about the money. I did not list every expense because that would have taken pages, but I gave him the total. $298,423 over 12 years. I told him I had kept records of every single dollar, not because I expected repayment, but because I wanted him to understand the scope of what I had given. I told him that I had given this money freely without expectation, because I believed that is what fathers do for their children. I told him I had never once asked for anything in return, except to be part of his family, to see my grandchildren grow up, to be included in the simple moments that make a family whole. I told him that he had not only failed to include me, but had actively worked to exclude me. He had lied to me, manipulated me, and allowed his wife to treat me like an inconvenience to be managed, rather than a father to be respected. Then I told him my decision. I wrote that I would no longer be providing any financial support to his family. Not because I did not love him, but because I had finally learned to love myself too. I wrote that I could not continue to pour my resources into a relationship that offered nothing but contempt in return. I wrote that he was a grown man with a job and a family, and it was time for him to take responsibility for his own life. I ended the letter by telling him that I still loved him, that I would always love him, that he was my son and nothing could ever change that. But I also told him that love without respect is not really love at all. It is just exploitation with a nicer name. I signed the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and mailed it the next day. For about a week I heard nothing. I started to wonder if Derek had even read the letter. Maybe Stephanie had intercepted it. Maybe he had thrown it away without opening it. Then my phone rang. It was Derek, but he was not calling to apologize. "Dad," he said, his voice tight with anger. "What is this letter supposed to mean?" "It means exactly what it says," I replied. "I am done supporting you financially." "You cannot do this," Derek said. "We are counting on you. We have bills to pay." "I am sure you do," I said. "But those are your bills, not mine." "We are going to lose the house," Derek said. "The house you helped us buy. Is that what you want?" "I helped you buy that house because I loved you and wanted you to have a good life," I said. "But that was before I knew how you really felt about me. Before I knew that my invitation to your son's birthday was a fake." Derek did not say anything. "You lied to me," I continued. "You sent me an invitation to the wrong date so I would not show up. Then when I found out, you blamed your wife for forgetting to call me. But you admitted on the phone that it was deliberate. You admitted that Stephanie never wanted me there. That is not Derek started." "Do not," I said, and my voice was firm. "Do not try to rewrite history now. I heard what you said. I remember every word." There was a pause. Then I heard another voice in the background. "Stephanie." She grabbed the phone from Derek. "Listen here," she said. Her voice was sharp, hostile. "You do not get to hold money over our heads like this. Family helps family. That is what you always said. If you stop now, you are abandoning your grandchildren." "I am not abandoning anyone," I said calmly. "I am simply refusing to be used anymore." "Used," Stephanie repeated. "You think you are being used. We included you in everything. We invited you to every holiday. You invited me to nothing I said. You turned me away on Christmas Eve. You lied about Thanksgiving. You gave me a fake date for Ethan's birthday party. Do not pretend otherwise." Stephanie was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You know what, Randall? I never liked you. From the first day I met you, I knew you were not good enough for this family. You are old-fashioned and stubborn, and you dress like a factory worker. My parents have class. My friends have class. You have nothing but a checkbook. And now you do not even have that, I said. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else. From power. From reclaiming something I had lost long ago. Over the next few days, the situation escalated. Stephanie started telling her side of the story to anyone who would listen. She told her parents that I had abandoned Derek's family in their time of need. She told their friends that I was a selfish old man who cared more about money than his own grandchildren. But Stephanie had made a mistake. She had underestimated my sister. Doris had been listening to me through all of this. She had heard every detail, every hurt, every betrayal, and she had kept quiet, letting me handle things my own way. But when she heard that Stephanie was spreading lies about me, she decided to act. Doris gathered all the evidence I had, the bank statements, the receipts, the copies of every check I had written. She also found the invitation card with the wrong date and the social media posts showing the party happened 4 days earlier. Then she sent everything to Stephanie's parents. I did not know she was doing this until it was already done. She called me afterward to explain. They needed to know the truth, Doris said. They were hearing Stephanie's version, which was full of lies. Now they have the facts. A few days later, I received a phone call from an unknown number. It was Stephanie's father. "Mr. Randall," he said. His voice was quiet, ashamed. "I owe you an apology. I had no idea what you had been going through. I had no idea how much you had given Derek and Stephanie over the years. My daughter told us a very different story. I did not say anything. I just listened. I saw the records," he continued. "The amounts you sent, the dates, everything. And I saw the invitation with the wrong date. I cannot believe they did that to you. I cannot believe my daughter was part of that." "I appreciate you calling," I finally said. "But with respect, this is between me and Derek." "I understand," he said. "But I want you to know that we have spoken to Stephanie. We told her that what she did was wrong. We told her that lying to you and excluding you from your grandson's birthday was cruel and unforgivable. She did not take it well." "I imagine not," I said. Derek called me 2 weeks after that conversation. His voice was different this time. Quieter. Shaky. Like he had been crying. "Dad," he said, "I am sorry." I waited. I did not help him. I let the silence stretch. "I was wrong," Derek continued. "I let Stephanie control everything. I let her push you away because it was easier than fighting with her. I chose peace in my house over my relationship with you. And that was wrong." "Yes," I said. "It was." "I do not know how to fix this," Derek said. "I do not know if you can ever forgive me." I thought about that for a long moment. "I do not know either," I said honestly. "But I know that forgiveness has to start with change. Real change. Not just words." "What do you want me to do?" Derek asked. "I want to see my grandchildren," I said. "Not at your house. Not with Stephanie watching. Just me and them. If you can arrange that, maybe we can start to rebuild something." Derek agreed. A few days later, I met Ethan and Emma at a park near their house. Derek dropped them off and drove away, leaving me alone with them for the first time in years. Ethan had grown so much. He was taller, lankier, with the beginning of the young man he would become. Emma was still small, still bright-eyed, still curious about everything. I took them to get ice cream. We walked around the park. We sat on a bench and watched the ducks in the pond. At one point, Ethan looked at me with serious eyes. "Grandpa," he said, "why did you not come to my birthday party?" I felt my heart break all over again, but I kept my face calm. "I tried to come," I said. but I got confused about the date. It was my mistake. But I want you to know that I thought about you that whole day. I love you very much." Ethan nodded, accepting this explanation. Children are trusting that way. They believe the adults who love them. I did not tell him the truth. Maybe someday when he is older he will figure it out on his own. But right now he does not need to carry that burden. He does not need to know that his parents lied to keep his grandfather away. That is not his weight to bear. Emma hugged me before she left. She said, "I missed you, Grandpa. When will you come again?" "Soon," I promised her. Very soon. 3 months have passed since that day in the park. I sold my apartment in Toledo. I did not need it anymore. There was nothing keeping me there except memories, and most of those memories had turned bitter. I moved to a small town on the coast of North Carolina. I found a little house near the beach, a simple place with white walls and a porch that looks out over the water. I can hear the ocean when I wake up in the morning and when I go to bed at night. The sound is healing in ways I cannot fully explain. I started fishing again, not on Lake Erie but in the ocean, casting my line into the waves and waiting patiently for something to bite. Most days I do not catch anything, but that is not the point. The point is the quiet, the solitude, the feeling of being connected to something larger than my own pain. I joined a volunteer group that repairs houses for elderly people who cannot afford it. We fix roofs, replace windows, rebuild porches. It feels good to work with my hands again, to see the results of my labor, to help people who actually appreciate it. I made friends in my new town, neighbors who stop by to chat, other retirees who invite me to barbecues and poker nights. People who know nothing about my past, who see me simply as Randall, the friendly electrician, who moved here from Ohio. The healing has been slow. There are still nights when I wake up at 3 in the morning, my mind spinning with thoughts of what could have been. There are still moments when I see a grandfather playing with his grandchildren in the park and feel a sharp pain in my chest. But the bad days are getting fewer. The good days are getting more. I have started to understand something important. My worth is not determined by how much I give to others. My value is not measured by the sacrifices I make. I am a person with my own dreams and desires and needs, and I deserve to be treated with basic human dignity no matter who is doing the treating. Derek still calls me sometimes. The conversations are short and awkward, but they are happening. He tells me about the kids, about his job, about small things that do not really matter. He does not ask for money anymore. He does not mention Stephanie. I do not know if we will ever have the relationship we once had. I do not know if the damage can be fully repaired. But I have learned to be okay with that uncertainty. I have learned that some questions do not have answers, and that is just how life works. Stephanie and I do not speak. She has never apologized, and I do not expect her to. Some people are not capable of admitting when they are wrong. She is one of those people. I have made peace with that. I see Ethan and Emma a few times a year now. Derek brings them to visit me in North Carolina, or I fly to Columbus and we spend the day together. The visits are short, but they are real. I am building a relationship with my grandchildren brick by brick, moment by moment. One day they will be old enough to understand what happened. They will have questions about why Grandpa lived so far away, why Mom always seemed uncomfortable around him, why there are years of family photos where he does not appear. I do not know what I will tell them when that day comes. Maybe I will tell them the truth. Maybe I will just tell them that families are complicated and that the most important thing is to love the people you have while you have them. There is one more thing I need to say. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to know that you are not alone. There are thousands of us out there, maybe millions. Parents who gave everything and received nothing. Parents who were pushed away by children who forgot where they came from. Parents who are sitting alone in empty apartments, wondering what they did wrong. I want you to know that you did not do anything wrong. You loved, you gave, you sacrificed. Those are not mistakes. Those are the actions of a good person, a good parent, a good human being. But I also want you to know that it is okay to stop. It is okay to draw a line. It is okay to say, I have given enough. It is okay to take care of yourself for a change. That is not selfishness. That is survival. I am 60 years old now. I do not know how many years I have left, but I know that I intend to spend them on my own terms. I will fish in the ocean. I will fix houses for people who need help. I will sit on my porch and watch the sunset and feel grateful for another day. And when I finally go to meet Linda again, wherever she is waiting for me, I will be able to look her in the eye and say that I did my best. I loved our son with everything I had. I gave him more than I could afford to give. And when it was not enough, when it was never going to be enough, I found the courage to walk away. That is not failure. That is wisdom. So here I am sitting on my porch, looking out at the ocean, a cup of coffee in my hand, the sound of waves in my ears. The weight that I carried for so long finally lifted from my shoulders. I do not know what tomorrow will bring. I do not know if Derek will ever truly understand what he lost. I do not know if my grandchildren will grow up to see me as a hero or a villain or just a distant figure from their childhood. But I know this, I loved them. I still love them. And I also learned finally to love myself. And sometimes that is all anyone can do. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever given everything to someone who did not appreciate it? Have you ever had to make the choice between your own well-being and a relationship that was slowly destroying you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who is going through the same thing. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps more than you know. And if you have not already, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss any of our future stories. If you know someone who might need to hear this message, someone who is giving too much and receiving too little, please share this video with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we are worthy of love and respect. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. I wish you peace. I wish you healing. And I wish you the courage to put yourself first when you need to. Until next time, take care of yourselves. You matter more than you know.